Hey, it was looking fabulous again today. Thank you. Thank you for always dressing up for us.
I made the mistake once of not coming in a funky suit, and I heard about it.
That's right.
Never again.
Look at her. That's right. So, but we're lucky to have Waypoint and Austin here to give us a little presentation this afternoon. As you can see, it's Home Inspections 101, or what to expect when you're doing a home inspection. So now's the time to get all your questions answered about the home inspection process. Austin's going to cover quite a few different types of inspections today. So we're going to talk about, the most common inspection being your buyer inspections, but there's also seller inspections. There's 4-point, there's wind mitigation inspections. Right, so we want to make sure that you have a good understanding of this whole process and what's covered in which area. And also, Austin's going to point out to you today some different things that you might want to look for when you are walking through a house with a seller. So there's going to be polyurethane plumbing and some different things that if you happen, we don't expect you guys to be experts in this, but if it's something that we can show you and say, okay, these kind of electrical boxes are absolutely need to be replaced, that might save you a lot of time and energy, because when you see that house for the first time and you see one of these electrical boxes, you can say to your sellers, look, this is, even though you have insurance on it today, a new buyer's not going to be able to get insurance. This is a major issue that we will have to deal with. So if you don't know that, the insurance company or the inspection company will let you know these things, but there's a few things we want to try to tip you off because the better informed you are, the sooner we find these things out, the better. So get all your questions answered. That's what Austin's here for today. If you have questions, he's got a great presentation. I hope the pictures don't scare you too much. All right, because the photos and things he's going to show you today are actual live inspections that he and his company have done in the past year and a half or so. And every time you do this presentation, it's like new stuff I haven't seen.
Yep.
So you're always updating too.
It's because we're always finding new things out in the field.
That's right. So without further ado, Austin, everyone.
Thank you for the introduction, Eric.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. So before we get started, who in here is brand new to real estate? Quick survey of the room. Okay, put your hands down. So who is not brand new to real estate? Okay, so for those of you that aren't brand new to real estate, how long have you been in the industry? You got your hand up for not brand new, right?
I did title work before.
Oh, you did title work before. Okay, awesome. So you know about the industry through the title side of it. Okay, perfect.
Couple years in a different state.
Couple years in a different state, okay. 2 years, okay. There's someone else over here?
3 years.
3 years, okay. Was there anybody over on this side of the room? Yes.
6 years.
6 years, okay, awesome. So for those of you that have been in real estate for a little while, some of this information may be things that you already know from being in the industry about home inspections. There are some changes that have come about on the 4-point recently, so there's going to be some good new information for you in there. And for those of you that are brand new to the industry, this is all going to be probably the first time you're seeing some of this information, so it's a good introduction on the different kinds of inspections you may come across, what to expect on a home inspection, what we can look for, what we can't look for, how to choose a home inspection company, and as Eric mentioned, get into some more detail about 4 points and wind mitigations. So getting right into the beginning of the presentation is just a quick overview of who I am. So my name's Austin. My position within the company is VP of Operations, but I'm actually one of the part owners of Waypoint Property Inspection. So we are family owned and operated. My father started the company 15 years ago. So March of this year will be our 15-year anniversary being in the area. He was a single man operation until 2013. My uncle joined as our next full-time inspector, and then I joined the company in 2014 doing the marketing. So my father, my uncle, and myself are the 3 owners of the company. We currently have 8 full-time inspectors, 1 in training. We're in the process of hiring an additional 4 by the end of this month. So we are one of the largest companies in the Tampa Bay region, which puts us in a really good position to help everyone in this class, because no matter which office you're going to, we're going to have inspectors that can cover those areas. So right now our main service area is Hillsborough, Polk, Pinellas, Pasco, Hernando, Sarasota, and Manatee counties. But as we continue to grow, we're going to continue to service more areas. I know last week we sent one of our inspectors up to Weeki Wachee to do an inspection. That was a fun drive for him, but we got it done. In addition to being involved with Waypoint, my father and I are also coaches in the inspection industry. So we're part of a mastermind group of home inspection business owners that communicate on a regular basis and meet 4 times a year to talk about how to grow companies. So the cool thing is, not only are we growing our business here, but we're also coaching other home inspection company owners on how to grow their business wherever they are across the country. So we're in a really cool position, and I do also wear my funky suits at those meetings too. So these things travel. So let's get into home inspections. So what is the process of choosing a home inspection company? Number 1 is, I always recommend that you give your clients multiple recommendations. Usually realtors give their clients a list of 3 and say pick which one you want to use. The reason why it's important to give multiple recommendations is because every client has their own wants and needs, so it's better for them to do their own research and choose the specific company that's going to meet those wants and needs. The second reason is, if you tell them to just use one specific company and they have a problem with that company, who are they going to come back to first? It's going to be you, because they're going to say, you told me to use them and now I have this issue. Whereas if you give them a list that you already know everyone on that list is reputable, but you give them a list and you let them choose which of those companies is going to best fit what they're looking for, it puts it back on them because they're the ones that made that end decision. So now we get into what should you look for when adding a home inspection company to your list. Number one is the most important, that they're licensed and insured in the state of Florida. So the state of Florida does require home inspectors to go through a licensing class, pass a test to get their home inspector license. So if you're looking at using a company, they should be able to provide their home inspector their license number or proof that they passed that certification. But also insured, so that if anything does happen during an inspection, it's not falling back on you or the client. That inspector is insured to be able to take care of it. Now this one is almost as important, if not more important, than being licensed. Being a member of an association. Now we have logos over on the right-hand side. So InterNACHI and ASHI are our two national organizations, and then FABI is our state organization for home inspection companies. The reason why you want to recommend someone who's a member of an association is because the associations require continuing education every year to stay a member. So you know that that home inspector is not someone who got licensed 10 years ago and hasn't touched anything since then about what's going on in the industry. By being a member of an association, you know that every year they are putting in the time to get more knowledge so that they know what's happening. On-the-job training is also very important. So, as I mentioned, to be a home inspector in Florida, you have to have a license. To get your license, you take courses. They can be online or in person. You pass a state test, you have your license. There is no requirement to actually go out to a home as part of your training for getting your home inspection license. So we have a guy who's been with us for about 2.5 years now, and the previous company he worked for was the first one out of school, and they had him do 2 half days of ride-alongs. And after 2 half days of ride-alongs, they sent him out on his own, and they said he was good enough to inspect. There is no inspector out there who is good enough to go on their own after 2 half days of ride-alongs right after getting out of their classes. So make sure the company that you're recommending has an on-the-job training program so that when they have newer inspectors, they are still thoroughly trained and know what they're doing before they're on their own inspecting a house. Value-added benefits, so just making sure that they're a company you can call after the inspection if you have questions, if they have any guarantees or warranties that come with the inspection. And we all know reputation is also very important, so just doing a simple Google search and seeing what the reviews are on that company, what past clients say about them. Now, the inspection process itself, what are we actually looking for? We call it the 3 M's, the major items, the minor items, and the maintenance items. Major items are safety hazards, things that can lead to safety hazards, or major issues with the home. What I don't want you to think is that a major item always means it's an expensive item. Because as I mentioned, a major item can be a safety hazard. So a bedroom missing a smoke detector is considered a safety hazard. But that's not super expensive to put a smoke detector in a bedroom. So sometimes people think that because it's classified as a major issue on the inspection report, that means it's going to be a headache, it's going to cost a ton of money, but that's not always the case. So don't automatically associate major items with expensive, it just means it could be a safety hazard or lead to a safety hazard. Now, minor items are more cosmetic. These are things that the client still needs to be aware about in the home, but really shouldn't impact their decision to purchase that home. A good example are common cracks. We see common cracks all over the place here in Florida. Now, clients that are moving from up north may not be as familiar with the amount of common cracks we have down here, so they may freak out about that a little bit. So in the inspection report, those minor items, we're still pointing it out to the clients because they still need to be aware they have common cracks, but we're doing it in a way that lets them know it's a minor item. It's not something they really have to worry about, but it's something that should be monitored to see if it develops into something more serious later on down the road. And the last thing is maintenance items. These are more just general maintenance recommendations on how to extend the lifespan of the systems in the home. So making sure you're changing your air filters regularly, making sure you have an HVAC tech come out and regularly service that system. So these are more recommendations on how to extend those lifespans. And another important point is we inspect everything we can access. We have it happen sometimes where our inspector tries to get up into the attic, but the seller has so much stuff in the attic that we can't do a thorough inspection. And the attic is one of the most important pieces of the inspection because it lets us see if there are any potential issues with the roofing system that we wouldn't just notice from the surface of the roof itself. Another common example is when we try and inspect the electrical panel in the garage. Is the seller may have bicycles, lawnmowers, a huge tool cabinet blocking our access to fully remove that panel. Well, fully removing that panel, as we're going to learn in a few minutes, lets us see what kind of wiring the home has, which could let us know that there's a potential issue there. So my important point with this is if you're the listing agent and you know that there's a buyer's inspector getting ready to come into your seller's home, make sure that seller clears every area that that inspector needs to access. Because if not, that inspector's not going to be able to do a thorough inspection, and now we're going to cause a delay because now we have to ask the seller to move those items out of the way and then come back out to finish the inspection. So just make sure that every part of that home is accessible for the inspector to go around and do a thorough job. Those of you that are taking notes, I love it, that's awesome. We're also gonna pass around a card at the end to collect your email because we have this whole presentation on the PDF with the pictures, with the notes added to it already, so you don't have to worry about trying to write everything down quickly. I am someone who still likes to take notes though, because there are studies out there that show if you're writing it down, you actually learn better than just listening. But we will send this out after the fact, so you all have it to reference. Now, some general information about home inspections. Number one, they are strictly visual and non-invasive. The easy way to sum this up is we can't see through walls. We don't know what's going on behind the wall unless there's a visual cue that we can see that lets us know there may be something going on behind that wall. Non-invasive means we're not going to cut out a piece of that wall to see what may be going on behind it. We're just looking for those visual cues. Now, another example of what may be invasive / non-invasive is, let's say we go to inspect the kitchen sink and the seller has maybe just a couple of cleaners in there. And our inspector can easily move those out of the way and do a thorough inspection of underneath that kitchen sink. But if he opens it up and they have 30 bottles of stuff under there and there's other types of items in there that's blocking our inspector's access, to move those kind of things out of the way would be considered an invasive inspection because now we're invading that seller's items to try and clear them out. Same thing with my example of if there's stuff in the attic blocking the inspector's access. If it's one thing that's small, that's not going to cause any damage, they can move it out of the way. But if the seller has boxes of stuff blocking our access, moving those would be considered invasive, and now we're opening ourselves up to liability to potentially damaging something. So keep in mind that our inspections are strictly visual. We're going based on our visual cues to help us determine what may be going on inside the home. And home inspectors are like general practitioners, so we are trained to give an overview of the systems in the home, but we are not trained to be specialists in every single area of that house. So for example, if we're inspecting the plumbing system and we find an issue with the plumbing system, we're going to call that out on the inspection report, but our next comment is going to be, we recommend you have a licensed plumber come to do a further evaluation. So we're there to find the problems, but then we're also there to recommend the specialist give you the further evaluation on that problem. Along similar lines, as clients sometimes ask us, well, how much is that going to cost to fix? That's a question we get a lot. And our answer is, we're not the specialists, so we can't answer that. Because we're doing our visual inspection, but once that plumber gets in there and they have one of those snake cameras that can go into the pipe, they may find something that's 10 times bigger than what we just saw from our visual inspection. So we don't want to quote the client a price when we're not the specialist in that area and then be inaccurate to what it actually could be. So we're there as a general practitioner to recommend the specialists. A home inspection is not a code inspection. Code is not part of a home inspector's training. We're there to look for form and function, that it looks proper and that it works the way it should. But we are not there to let you know if something is up to code. That is not a home inspector's job. And a home inspection is a freeze frame of the house's condition at the point in time that we are there. So just like sometimes people may think we can see through walls, they may also think we can predict the future. Now the example I like to illustrate this with is, have you ever had it happen where you're driving down the highway, normal day, everything is just like it is all the time, and then your check engine light comes on, right? Because now you have an issue with your car. It's not like you were thinking 10 minutes before that, I have a feeling that today my check engine light is going to come on and something's going to go wrong with my car. Well, think of a house the same way. A house has so many moving systems in it that anything can happen at any point in time. So when we're there doing an inspection, that inspection report is a freeze frame of the house's condition when we were there. But it's not predicting what's going to happen a day from now, a week from now, a month from now. So keep that in mind. We're not there to predict the future. We're just there reporting on exactly what we see at that specific point in time. Then last but not least on this list, we take confidentiality seriously. So let's say the buyer hires us to do the inspection before they want to purchase the home. What we have happen sometimes is the buyer shares that inspection report with the listing agent or with the seller so that they can find the items that need to be repaired. But then we have the listing agent and the seller call us wanting to discuss the inspection findings. Well, we don't discuss those with any outside party other than our clients and their agent unless we get authorization. So if the buyer lets us know that it's okay to talk to the listing agent about the inspection results, we can do so. But we need that authorization first, because the information we're producing in an inspection report is confidential for the party who hired us, because it's going to be used for negotiating. We want to make sure that we're looking out for the party that did hire us for that inspection. Now, the most common types of inspections we have, number one, the most common is you're the buyer's agent, and your buyer's going to get that inspection on the home so they know what condition it's in before they move forward with the purchase. They can negotiate repairs, concessions on the price, everything like that. Now, number two is if you're the listing agent. Sometimes it may be advantageous for your seller to get their own inspection before they even put their house on the market, which is called a pre-listing inspection. Some of the things that we're going to look at later in the 4-point section on big red flag items that will prevent a buyer from getting insurance. If a seller may have those in their home, they may want to get their own inspection so they're aware of it. That way they're not surprised when a buyer's inspector comes in, finds a ton of issues that seller didn't think the home had, that now that seller has to make concessions on. So So sometimes it is advantageous for a seller to get their own inspection ahead of time. New construction phase inspection. So with all the new construction going on around us, we can come out during different phases of that new home being built to make sure the builder is doing a quality job. And we're going to look at some pictures here in a second about that. 11-month warranty inspection. So brand new homes typically come with a 1-year builder's warranty. We can come out around month 10 or 11 and do a full inspection. That way, if we find any issues, that homeowner can get them addressed by the warranty before it expires. And then wind mitigations and 4 points, we'll go into more detail later. So let's talk a little bit about the different phases that we can come out during a new home being built. Now this first phase is called the PreSlap Form. This is an example of a home we inspected up in Odessa, in one of the large communities going up there. This is what the home looks like during this phase. So you can see basically everything on the site has been laid out for that slab to be poured. So you can see you have the vapor barrier, you have the side reinforcements. It may be a little bit hard to tell in this picture, but you have some plumbing already inserted there. So everything about this site is ready for the slab to get poured, but we get out there right before they pour that slab. And the reason is we're looking for different issues with the plumbing or with the laying of the barrier, or like here, for example, the structural wire was completely missing from this section here. You can see there were minor holes visible in the vapor barrier, and then insulation was missing off of this supply pipe. Are these huge issues right now? They may not be, but they may develop into larger issues down the road. And if these are buried under a concrete slab, addressing these is going to be so much more work later on down the road than it is for the builder to fix it right now before they actually lay that slab. So these are the different things we're looking for during a pre-slab inspection. Now the second phase we can come out is called the pre-drywall. This is actually that same home after they started building it. So the pre-drywall phase is when the framing is installed, the HVAC ductwork is installed, the electrical and the plumbing is installed, but like the name says, before the drywall gets put on. The reason why this phase is so crucial is because as soon as that drywall gets put on, it hides any potential issues with those systems. So some examples of what we're looking for during this phase. On this home, we noticed some holes. Now some of these may not be huge issues, they just need to be patched properly. So we're there to make sure the builder does patch them properly. We had common settlement cracks up to 1/8 of an inch over there. As I mentioned, common cracks, not a huge issue, but they do need to be monitored to make sure they don't turn into more serious cracks that could be signs of structural issues. But within this home, the more serious concern was the way they were putting together the framing. So you can see these nails are clearly not fully going into this middle piece right here of the frame, with the way that these frames were cut. This right here is not flush up against each other like it should be. And then over here, there should be no light shining to the other side of this beam, which means they didn't fully secure it down. So some framing issues that we would have not noticed if the drywall was already put on this home. Now here's another example of what we're looking for during the framing. So you can see the subfloor truss appeared to be improperly installed. Does anybody have any guesses as far as what's improper about this picture?
Upside down.
It's upside down. They installed, so for those of you that aren't seeing it, you see this metal plate down here? On every other truss, it's up here. So they installed this truss upside down, which could lead to more structural issues down the road. So in this specific case, we called it out on our inspection report. The agent and the client went to the builder rep and said, hey, do you know about this? And the builder rep said yes. So the question was, well, were you going to address it? Or is it just because now we found it that you have to get it addressed? So that client ended up getting a structural engineer out to the home to do a full evaluation of it. But that's something that we noticed on a new construction pre-drywall inspection. Here's another example of a home that we did up in Odessa. This one's kind of silly, but you see that little white speck on the roof right there?
Yes.
They nailed in the roofing materials bag to the roof itself. Yeah. More seriously, around this home though, we saw structural issues. So as I mentioned, some minor holes or cracks can be repaired. When we see things like this, where it's going through both sides of the structure, and we're noticing multiple points where it's starting to deteriorate, that could be a serious sign of structural problems. Now moving inside of the home, the plumbing system was being improperly supported by a cracked piece of wood, and then that plumbing system was improperly supporting the HVAC ductwork. And you can see there's a piece of wood about to puncture it right there as well.
Who was this builder?
I don't remember for this. I don't remember for this specific community. I believe this is one of the larger ones that has like 4 or 5 builders that are building within it.
Wow.
So I'm not sure the specific builder for this home.
They probably don't like you.
You know,
They probably shouldn't be building.
yeah. We could talk about that for a while. Last thing in this home that we did notice is some lumberyard mold on some of the trusses. So lumberyard mold develops when these trusses are manufactured. They sit in the lumberyard for who knows how long, exposed to the elements. And then you see the trucks that bring them in front of the houses, they dump them in front of the houses, and they sit in front of the house for who knows how long with the elements, you know, the weather, the rain, everything that we get. And so what happens is mold starts to develop on these beams and these trusses. Now, this is an extreme example of a home that we did down in Riverview, where every single truss that the builder installed into the home had this lumberyard mold on it. Now, the thing is, this can be treated, this can be addressed, it just has to be treated properly. It has to be treated properly. And in this specific instance, the client who was looking to buy this house had children with autoimmune issues, and so she decided it wasn't worth the risk of moving forward with this home, so she actually backed out of the deal. Now, what doesn't really make sense to us is that client bought another house in the same community by the same builder that was already finished, so we couldn't even get in to see if it had any of these issues in it. But regardless, this is something that we have noticed out there that, once again, if this had been covered up by the drywall, we would have never known if it had been properly treated or not. Some other miscellaneous issues we found with the new construction homes: loose roof coverings, there was cracked glass, this roofing material is chipped down here, kind of hard to see. Single wrap straps, which we'll talk a little bit later about how you can get discounts for those with the wind mitigation inspection. The builder hadn't installed them correctly, which means the client would not get the full discount for it. Some more things, that's a pretty large hole that we found on a home. This one's a little bit more serious. Instead of having a fire block, they had cardboard. So cardboard was being used as fire block. Something highly flammable was being used in a place where there's supposed to be something that prevents any potential flames from getting through. Loose roof material, so we shouldn't be able to just lift it up as easily as the inspectors did.
Are you
Visible
gonna get on
holes.
the roof and check on it?
So it depends on the builder. Some builders do not allow us on their roofs. Depends on the builder. Patio cover had a hole in it. They completely installed the sliding glass door upside down. Sprinkler lines were damaged, causing flooding in the yard. Insulation had been moved, so there was improper levels of insulation inside the attic. This one's kind of silly, but come on, I didn't even line that up properly. They missed grout, so you can see just a bunch of various issues. Trim pieces had visible gaps. That's potential for rodents to get inside the attic and cause some havoc up there. Lights not being secure, dangling, so the list goes on and on. So at the end of the day, the important point is, don't assume that just because it's a brand new house, it's going to be in perfect condition. And you asked the question about the builder, if I knew what builder it was. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter the builder. What matters is the construction manager that's overseeing the construction of that home. Because you can have a construction manager who pays a lot of attention to detail, and they may only have a few houses that they're overseeing so they can spend more time in each one. Or you may have a construction manager who has 10 to 15 houses that they're overseeing, and all they can do is jump between the houses and do a preliminary check to make sure they're getting done correctly. So the builder doesn't really matter, because all builders are going through the growing pains right now, and so what's happening is they're having to hire on crews that are less experienced to get these homes built quickly. So the question that we always get too is, well, what about the county inspector? Aren't the county inspectors supposed to be catching these things? The answer is they are, but the problem is the county is also understaffed, and now we have these huge expansions of communities being built. The county's trying to meet that demand and get these homes inspected. So we've heard instances of the county inspector pulling up to the home, sitting in their car for 5 minutes and then driving away, which means they never actually got out to look at the house. They just signed off on the form that it was good to go. We've heard of an instance where a county inspector did look at a house, made sure it was in good condition, but then signed off on the 5 houses next to it without actually going to those 5 houses. Now, you can't really blame them. They have a long list of houses they have to get to, and they have to get it done. So the important part of this is that it's important to have a third-party inspector on the client's side to make sure the builder is doing their due diligence to make a quality new construction home. Now, the last important point I'll make on that before we move on is, if you have a client who's wanting to get the new construction phase inspections, make sure it's known up front what the builder will and will not allow. So we have some builders out there that are trying to say we're only allowed to come in during the final inspection. They don't want us coming in during the pre-drywall because they don't want us finding issues that they now have to fix. In the instances we've had that happen, the clients have been able to argue to get the pre-drywall approved. The problem is, one of the cases was the drywall was supposed to get put on 3 days after the client called us, and now you're just causing a delay in the construction because now she had to go back and argue with the builder and try and get us in there, so it pushed back their building table a little bit. So just know that the end point of this is, know up front what the builder is saying is allowable, and if your client wants to get more in there, make sure it's negotiated at the beginning. That way we're not trying to scramble at the last minute to get inspections done on that home.
The one bigger point I'll make there too, I think it's really important to understand that nobody is working on your buyer's side but you. That on the other side of the transaction, the builder, the construction team, the sales rep that you're meeting with, the mortgage person is typically from the builder as well. They're all on the same team. They're working for a company that's being managed by stockholders, right? Rushing to get these homes done quickly. So there's nobody that protects your client's interests on their behalf. Everyone is protecting the builder, and the builder's interest is working on the other side of the deal. So that's why this is so critical to be able to tell your buyers buying new construction, make sure that you want to have a phase inspection for this to make sure that the builder is doing the things. We've seen many instances, right, where after they buy the house, then the issues are discovered. And you know how much more difficult it is to get the builder to fix these kinds of problems once you've taken possession of the property, rather than finding it while it's in the construction phase. It's so much easier to be able to handle because you have so much more leverage as the buyer hasn't moved into it and actually closed on the house yet. So it really is important that you have somebody who's representing your buyers and their interests other than the builder who has their own interest in mind.
Is it a lot more expensive than to get a regular inspection? Because you have to come a few times, no?
So the price of the inspection itself stays the same as if it was, so let me try and find a best way to explain it. There is a price for each phase we have to come out. But we do have package deals where there are discounts depending on which phases the client wants to add in. I don't have it memorized off the top of my head, but our office does know what those package deals are. Another good point to make of that is sometimes we have agents ask us, well, how do I let the clients know, whether they need to get this done? On our website, we have a section dedicated to new construction that has pictures on what we found. So if you have clients that are wanting to consider it, you can just direct them to the website and they can see for themselves, what are the issues we're finding in new construction homes. Now, along similar lines are investor flips. So we have this, it's been happening for a long time in Seminole Heights, South Tampa, over in the Dallas, St. Pete area. Some people are under the understanding that an investor flip means it's a brand new house as well. I rented a house in St. Pete a couple years ago that was built in 1930, but it had been flipped right before I rented it. And that was the mindset of the landlord was, well, it's a brand new house, so it shouldn't have any issues. We were having plumbing problems. So it's a brand new house, it shouldn't have any issues. So this is a home that we inspected over in Seminole Heights. This investor, they made it look like an HGTV house. It looks perfect on the inside.
Yeah.
But you know it's in this presentation for a reason, right? So when we actually got underneath the house, almost every pier that was supporting it was deteriorated, cracked, falling apart, meaning this middle beam over here was rotting and starting to bend. Yeah. So this was a classic case of an investor putting all the money where the client would see walking through the home, but not putting the money where it was actually going to make sure the home was in good structural condition. So my point on this is, don't think that just because it's an investor renovation and it looks brand new, that it doesn't need a thorough inspection. It still does. Because the bones of that house are still however old that house is, not when the renovation was done. Unless you have an investor that really did that and went the extra mile, but that's not what we're seeing. So keep in mind that even renovations need to have home inspections completed on them.
How much would it cost to fix something like that, Austin?
I was thinking the same.
I believe in this case, the structural engineer quoted somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. Yeah. And keep in mind, something we're noticing too is there's a lot of first-time home buyers that want to get in the Seminole Heights area. And the houses are not cheap at all in Seminole Heights. So you're talking about a first-time home buyer who may be already maxing out the top end of their budget to get in there, and if they don't know about something like this, having that extra cost added on, that can be huge to them. So, yep.
You could sue for that.
That's a good question. I don't know if Eric would have more.
You can sue for that.
Well, if you chose not to have an inspection, you have no remedy. If you have an inspection, you find these problems during the inspection phase of your home, you can get it taken care of. This is the importance of why we have Austin here today. So,
with an investor doing all that work and everything, you don't think you have some knowledge?
Or when he bought it.
It's not the knowledge,
can't-
it's
well-
that they don't wanna spend the money.
They're not spending the money.
Well, you don't wanna spend the money and
You
you
jump $30,000 on top of
Well, my
that
question is, it wouldn't be in the
$200,000
seller's
house
discretion?
we're
Or you'd
looking
have
at
to
today.
prove.
Obviously, if he's trying to sell it, he did not put
No,
it
it's
in
not,
the
look guys, it's not
seller's
about proving intent, it's not about any of that. Because you gotta realize that unless your buyer does their due diligence and find this, you don't know whether or not the previous owner maybe just did the cosmetic fixes on the inside, right? Maybe the previous owner didn't know about this. We can't necessarily, it's hard to prove these kinds of things, so don't ever try to go down that road. You just wanna say, look, make sure you look at everything. It might look beautiful on the inside, but that's lipstick on a pig on a house like this, right? You need to get in there, do a full home inspection, because when you discover these things, I guarantee you, if my buyers go see this house and this is the result of these inspections with these huge foundational issues they find with the house, there are huge structural problems with this house that we would either need to have the seller take care of and repair, or I would say, let's go look at something different.
And they
Because
would
this
say,
is too
but I
much of a
love
risk.
this house, nobody, but this been this way for
Fantastic,
50
well then if
years."
you're willing to take this on, then by all means. But, you know, in a year or two, when, you know, your living room floor is sideways, right? Might look beautiful, nice hardwood,
Yeah, but it's 100
but
years
ultimately,
old,
you're gonna be able to
it's
drop a
fine.
marble and it's gonna roll to the other side of the room because these
Aesthetic.
beams are cracking and, you know, so you just wanna be careful of making sure your buyers do their due diligence. They don't get fooled by how beautiful the pictures are, how beautiful the living room is, and not, you know, have somebody go in and do this kind of level of inspection. So many people get fooled and lured by, oh, this looks so great, right? They did an awesome job on this renovation. I can't believe what you've done here, and just take it at the face value. Now, I believe the seller knew and found out about these issues. You know, I believe that whoever renovated this house probably said, okay, well, this is, but they also know that putting the 30 grand into this, they don't get to put the 30 grand into making the house look nice.
Exactly.
We have a lot of people that are gonna flip it. This house will sell for 70,000 more than they bought it for because they put into cosmetic and they sell people on the living room and the kitchen and the cabinets, right? Whereas really there are bigger issues going on. So make sure the key message here, find out all the issues, and you do that with an inspection.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions before we go into 4 points? All right.